Enduring pain many would deem impossible, that has been my legacy. But today, I want you to know this: no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes. My name is Barbara Wilson, and this is the story of how I survived a childhood shadowed by fear, betrayal, and silence, and how I found my strength to rise above it all. I'm now 70 years old, living quietly in Bodie, California, a ghost town that echoes with whispers of the past. But my own past is no ghost story. It's a real battle, fought in silence and solitude. It's a story about a little girl who once believed she was invisible, unheard, and unloved, and about the woman she became, strong, hopeful, and unbreakable. My earliest memories are warm and bright, filled with laughter and love. I was lucky once. I had a father who adored me. My dad was my safe place, my protector, the one person who made the world feel like home. He was a tall, gentle man with soft eyes and a booming laugh that filled every room with light. I was his shadow, the little girl who followed him everywhere, clinging to his hand, eager for his stories before bedtime. We lived in a modest house not far from the rugged hills outside Bodie. My mother was kind and sweet, always humming while she worked in the kitchen, her eyes sparkling with quiet happiness. Those days felt endless, filled with small moments of joy, the smell of fresh coffee brewing in the morning, the sound of my father's laughter mingling with the rustling wind outside, the warmth of my mother's hand on my shoulder. Life was simple, but it was good. I looked up to my father in every way. He was strong, kind, and patient. When he smiled, the whole world seemed safe. I wanted to be like him, brave, compassionate, a protector of those I loved. But life, as I soon learned, has a way of turning even the brightest skies gray without warning. That brightness dimmed the day my father died. I remember it as clearly as if it happened yesterday, the bitter scent of coffee still in the air, the quiet hum of the television, and then the sudden stillness. My father clutched his chest, his face pale with fear. I'd never seen him afraid before. My mother's panic filled the room as neighbors rushed in. The sirens wailed, but my father never came home again. With him went the light in my mother's eyes. The woman who once sang while washing dishes became a shadow, drifting through the house with hollow eyes. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, and the warmth that had once filled our home turned cold and empty. My mother tried to hold on for me, for herself, but the weight of loss crushed her spirit. She searched desperately for work, but jobs were hard to keep when your heart was breaking. Nights were filled with tears whispered into the dark, prayers for a miracle that never came. And then, life took another cruel turn. One afternoon at the local Walmart, my mother met a man, a stranger, who offered to help with her bags, who smiled kindly and spoke politely. At first, he seemed like a blessing, a chance to bring back the happiness we'd lost. He brought roses, called me his little one, and promised to care for us. My mother smiled again, and for a moment, I wanted to believe in that promise too. But deep inside, I felt a chill. There was something about that man, something I couldn't name that made my skin crawl. When he hugged me, I wanted to run. When his eyes met mine, they didn't hold warmth like my father's. They held something colder, something that made me small. I tried to tell my mother, but she brushed me off with a smile, saying, "You're just jealous, sweetie. He only wants what's best for us." And just like that, I learned to keep my fears to myself, because soon, the man who seemed to save us became the nightmare I could never escape. After my father passed away, the world I knew began to unravel. The warmth that once wrapped around our small family faded into a cold shadow. My mother, once full of laughter and light, seemed to vanish before my eyes. She wasn't gone physically, but her spirit was broken, trapped in a grief that swallowed her whole. Money became scarce. Bills piled up on the kitchen table like a mountain I could never climb. We lost the sense of security we once took for granted. The house that had been my sanctuary now felt like a cage. I watched my mother try to hold everything together, but with every passing day, she grew more fragile. Her smiles became rare, and when they did come, they felt forced, like the flicker of a candle struggling against the wind. I was only a child, but I understood that things were different now. The light in my parents' eyes, the light that had made life feel safe, was gone. I clung to the memory of my father, but that wasn't enough to keep the darkness at bay. One day, while my mother was at work, she came home with a man. I remember the way he smiled at her, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was polite, even kind at first, but there was a hardness beneath it, like the surface of a frozen lake, hiding something dark beneath. He introduced himself as Michael. He carried our groceries inside, held doors open, brought my mother flowers. For a while, he seemed like the answer to our prayers, the balm to our wounds. My mother's laughter returned, at least on the surface. She said maybe it was time to move on, to let go of the past and start fresh. I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I knew. I felt it in the way Michael looked at me too long, too intense. When he hugged me, his touch was cold, not comforting. His voice was soft, but there was an edge beneath it that made my skin crawl. I didn't want to be near him, but I was too afraid to say anything. I tried to tell my mother once. I remember sitting on the couch, voice trembling, trying to explain the feeling I couldn't name. "Mom, I don't like him," I said quietly. "He scares me." She smiled, touching my cheek gently. "You're just jealous, sweetheart. He only wants what's best for us." From that moment on, I learned to keep my fears to myself. I became quiet, shrinking into the shadows of the house. When Michael and my mother married, everything changed. Before, my mother made the decisions, but now it was Michael who controlled everything. He decided what we ate, where we went, and what I was allowed to do. At first, it felt normal he said it was for our own good, but soon, I realized my opinions didn't matter anymore. I remember the small things that began to make me feel trapped. The way Michael would stand outside my bedroom door for no reason, his eyes lingering too long. The way he called me beautiful in a voice that sent chills down my spine, not warmth. One afternoon, my mother left for work early, tired from long hours. I was alone with Michael in the living room. He called me to sit beside him on the couch. Something inside me screamed to run, but I stayed frozen. "Come on, Barbara," he said softly. "You don't have to be afraid of me." But I was afraid. Home, the place that should have been my refuge, had become my prison. From that day on, Michael's presence was everywhere. If I was in the kitchen, he was there. If I went to the bathroom, he loomed near the door. If I retreated to my room, minutes later, he was outside, watching, waiting. I tried to tell myself it was paranoia. Maybe I was imagining things. But the fear never left me. My heart raced every time he was close. My skin crawled. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. At school, things were no better. Kids whispered cruel names behind my back, the weird girl, the orphan, the whale. I was picked last for every team. Teachers saw but pretended not to notice. I felt invisible and alone. I began to dread each day, hoping to disappear, to vanish from a world that only seemed to hurt me more. At night, I would lie awake, clutching my blanket, waiting for the sounds in the hallway that told me Michael was near. I locked my door and prayed he would forget about me, but he never did. One night, I heard his footsteps dragging down the hall, his voice calling my name in a whisper that made my blood run cold. He tried the doorknob again and again. I curled up, shaking with fear. When the footsteps finally faded, I knew this was just the beginning. The fear was suffocating, but worse was the silence. My mother saw it all but said nothing. She stayed silent, caught between the man she loved and the daughter she couldn't protect. I felt alone, and yet I had no choice but to keep going, until one day, my teacher asked me to stay after class. "Barbara, is everything okay?" she asked gently. My heart pounded. For a moment, I thought about telling her everything, but the words stuck in my throat. "I'm fine," I whispered. She looked at me with concern but said nothing more. That was the moment I realized how truly alone I was. No one was coming to save me. After that day with my teacher, I started to retreat even further inside myself. School was no longer just a place of learning. It was another battleground. The whispers, the cruel jokes, the cold stares, they all became part of my daily life. I walked the halls feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world, desperate to disappear, yet trapped in my own skin. At home, things didn't get better. Michael's presence grew heavier and darker with each passing day. He became the master of our house, the man who ruled every inch of it with a silent, suffocating control. My mother, once my refuge, became distant. She spent long hours at work, and even longer hours staring blankly at the walls when she was home. Sometimes I'd hear her crying softly at night, but when I asked if she was okay, she'd quickly brush it off and say she was tired. Michael controlled everything, what we ate, when we slept, where we could go. Even my smallest actions were monitored. If I took too long in the shower, he'd scold me. If I answered a question too slowly, he'd punish me with cold silence or harsh words. I watched my mother shrink into herself, torn between fear and loyalty. I wanted to scream at her to see what was happening, to believe me, but I was too scared. She chose him every time, and I was left with nothing but silence. The strangest thing was how normal everything seemed to outsiders. To the neighbors, we were just another family. To my teachers, I was just a quiet, withdrawn girl who didn't cause trouble. No one saw the prison I lived in. One evening, when my mother was away for work, Michael stayed home alone with me. I locked myself in my room, praying he wouldn't come near. But I heard the slow, deliberate steps outside my door, the faint creak as he tried the knob. My heart hammered in my chest. "Barbara," he whispered, "open the door." I didn't move. "Open it now," he demanded, voice low and dangerous. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to disappear into the darkness. Finally, the footsteps faded, but the terror stayed with me. That night, I realized that my home, the place that should have been safe, was the most dangerous place in the world. I became an expert at silent resistance. I avoided being alone with him, stuck close to my mother when she was home, and disappeared into my own world when I could. But Michael was always watching, waiting for the moment to strike. At school, the torment continued. I was the target of cruelty and exclusion. My classmates whispered about me, mocked me, and laughed behind my back. One day in gym class, I was the last to be picked, and one boy shouted, "There goes the whale again." The room erupted with laughter, and my teacher didn't say a word. That was when I stopped trying. I stopped raising my hand. I stopped hoping for someone to notice or care. I walked the halls looking at the floor, pretending I was invisible. One day, a new girl arrived at school, Amber. She was different, with dark hair, cautious eyes, and a quiet strength. She approached me during recess and asked if she could sit beside me. No one had ever done that before. I nodded, surprised but grateful. She didn't care about the whispers or the rumors. She sat with me, talked to me, and slowly, I began to open up. When she asked why I always stayed alone, I told her it was easier that way. When you're alone, no one can hurt you, I said softly. Amber listened without judgment and shared that she had her own battles. Her friendship became a lifeline, a small light in my dark world. With Amber by my side, I found a little courage. One day, after being chosen last again in gym class, Amber took my hand and said, "If she's not on the team, I won't play either." The classroom fell silent. That moment changed everything for me. For the first time, someone stood up for me. I wasn't invisible anymore. But even with Amber's friendship, fear still gripped my heart. Michael was still at home. The nightmares still haunted me. One Friday evening, my mother went out for a work dinner, leaving me alone with Michael. I locked myself in my room, but I knew he was waiting outside, watching, planning. His voice called to me from the hallway, soft and sinister. "Barbara, come here." I stayed silent. He tried the doorknob again and again. I curled up on the floor, trembling. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this anymore. I needed help. The next day at school, I wanted to tell Amber everything, but the words wouldn't come. She noticed something was wrong. "You know you can talk to me, right?" she said gently. I nodded, but I was tired of talking and being ignored. Then Amber did something I'll never forget. She took my hand and said simply, "I believe you." Those 3 words meant more than anything in the world. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. After that moment with Amber, everything started to shift inside me. I still felt scared. I still felt trapped. But for the first time in a long time, I had a flicker of hope, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, I could fight back. At home, though, nothing changed. Michael's control tightened like a noose around our family. He was no longer the polite stranger who carried bags and brought flowers. He was the man who dictated every detail of our lives, the man who watched me like a hawk, always waiting for me to slip up. If I was late coming home from school, he would punish me with cold silence or angry words. If I spoke back or showed any defiance, I would be grounded or locked in my room for hours. He told me, "This isn't a hotel. You will respect me because I'm the man of this house." My mother was caught in the middle. She loved Michael, or at least she wanted to. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear that haunted me. She tried to keep peace, but it felt like she had lost herself. I remember one afternoon when I was taking a shower, and Michael suddenly appeared at the bathroom door. "Why are you taking so long?" he demanded. I froze, unable to answer. He didn't wait for a reply. He just stared, his gaze burning into me like fire. I felt naked and powerless. That was the day I realized there was no safe place, not at school, not at home. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, heart pounding, listening for the sound of his footsteps outside my door. Sometimes I imagine the door handle turning, the soft creak of the hinges. I would clutch my blanket tight, wishing I could disappear. My mother would often be asleep by then, exhausted from long shifts at work. I was alone with my fear. One night, I heard him whisper my name, soft and low, like a predator stalking his prey. Barbara. I didn't answer. He tried the doorknob. It rattled. I held my breath, trembling. The door pushed open just a crack. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated, but I knew it wasn't over. At school, the bullying worsened. Kids who had once only whispered now shouted insults in my face. I was called names so cruel that sometimes the tears came before I could stop them. Teachers saw but did nothing. The world around me was silent. I began to think that maybe they wanted me to suffer, that maybe I was meant to be alone. Amber stayed by my side through it all. She was the only one who believed me, who stood up for me when others turned away. One day, she told me, "You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to live like this." Her words gave me strength. Together, we made a plan. I would tell someone. I would no longer be silent. The day I told the school counselor was terrifying. Sitting across from a stranger, my voice shook as I spoke the words I'd kept hidden for so long. My stepfather, he hurts me. The counselor listened quietly, then called the authorities. It felt like the walls of my prison were cracking. When the police arrived, my mother was shocked. At first, she couldn't believe it. But then, she saw the truth in my eyes, the fear, the pain. For the first time, she chose to believe me. Michael was arrested that day. I remember standing by the front door, watching as the police put him in the car. He looked back at me with eyes full of hatred, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Even behind bars, the fear he planted inside me didn't disappear overnight, but slowly, things began to change. My mother started therapy. She faced her guilt and pain, and so did I. Together, we began to rebuild our lives. I realized I wasn't just a victim, I was a survivor. I wanted to help others who suffered as I did. With Amber's encouragement and the support of caring adults, I began speaking out. I shared my story at community centers, schools, and support groups. Each time I spoke, a piece of my pain lifted. Years later, I founded New Beginnings, an organization dedicated to helping children and families escape violence and find hope. It started small, just a few meetings with victims and their loved ones, but the need was enormous. Our little group grew, and so did the impact. One day, a young girl named Sophia came to us, scared and silent like I once was. Watching her find her voice was proof that the cycle of pain could be broken. My story was no longer just about me. It was about all of us who dared to hope for a better life. School, which should have been a place of learning and friendship, became yet another battlefield for me. Each day, I walked the halls feeling like a ghost, unseen except for the cruel whispers and pointed fingers that followed me wherever I went. The kids called me names I couldn't forget: the weird orphan, the fat girl, the loser. Every word felt like a sharp knife slicing through my heart. Teachers saw it all, but chose to look away. I remember one day in gym class when I was the last to be picked for a team. One boy shouted, "Here comes the whale again." Laughter erupted around me, and my teacher glanced in my direction, but said nothing. That silence cut deeper than any insult. I tried to keep my head down. to disappear, but the pain was constant. The loneliness weighed on me like a heavy cloak. I wanted to run away, to vanish from a world that seemed to want me gone. At home, the nightmare continued. Michael's presence was suffocating. He watched my every move, his eyes always lingering too long. The house that should have been my refuge felt like a prison. Some nights, I locked myself in my room and prayed that the torment would end, but the fear never left me. I heard footsteps outside my door, whispers calling my name, the cold touch of control closing in. And yet, through all this darkness, a small light appeared. Amber. She was new at school, quiet and cautious. But when she sat beside me at lunch one day and asked if she could be my friend, it was the first time in a long while that I felt hope. Amber didn't care about the rumors or the teasing. She saw me for who I was, a scared girl, desperate for kindness. Our friendship grew slowly but steadily. She listened when I spoke, even if my words were few. She stood by me when the other kids laughed. She believed me when no one else did. One day, during gym class, when I was about to be left out again, Amber took my hand and said, "If she's not on the team, I won't play either." The room went silent. For the first time, someone stood up for me, but even with Amber's friendship, the fear and pain inside me didn't disappear. At home, Michael's control grew stronger. At school, the bullying continued. One night, when my mother was working late, Michael stayed home with me. I locked myself in my room, heart pounding, but I knew he was outside, waiting. His voice came softly through the door, calling my name, "Barbara, come here." I stayed silent, trembling. He tried the doorknob, rattling it. I curled up on the floor, wishing I could disappear. When the footsteps finally faded, I knew the nightmare was far from over. The next day at school, I wanted to tell Amber everything, but the words caught in my throat. She noticed and gently said, "You know you can talk to me." "Right." I nodded but was too tired to speak. Then she did something that changed everything. She took my hand and said, "I believe you." Those 3 words gave me strength I never knew I had. For the first time, I knew I wasn't alone. Amber's simple words, "I believe you," were like a lifeline thrown into the stormy sea of my life. For years, I had kept my fear and pain locked away, convinced that no one would listen. No one would care. But with her by my side, I started to realize that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to face this alone. School remained a difficult place, but Amber's friendship made the unbearable moments easier to bear. She was my shield when the cruel kids whispered behind my back, my voice when I couldn't find my own, when she stood up for me in front of our classmates. It was as if a small crack appeared in the wall of isolation that had surrounded me for so long. One afternoon, after class, Amber and I made a decision that changed my life forever. She said, "We have to tell someone. You don't have to keep this inside anymore." My heart pounded with fear, but also with a flicker of hope. I nodded, trusting her. Together, we went to the school counselor's office, a small, quiet room that felt both intimidating and safe. I remember sitting across from a kind man with gentle eyes, my hands trembling as I struggled to find the words. "My stepfather." "He hurts me," I whispered, my voice breaking. The counselor listened carefully, never interrupting. When I finished, tears streaming down my face, he promised to help. He called the police and Child Protective Services, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of relief. The days that followed were overwhelming. the police came to our home. My mother was shocked and confused when they told her what was happening. At first, she couldn't believe it. But when she looked into my eyes, the truth was undeniable. For the first time, my mother chose to believe me. Michael was arrested that day, taken away from our lives forever. Standing at the door as the police led him away, I saw the hatred in his eyes. Even behind bars, the fear he planted in me lingered, but so did a new feeling, freedom. Though the trauma didn't disappear overnight, that moment marked the beginning of healing. My mother and I began therapy. She faced her guilt and pain, and I faced mine. I slowly learned that I was not to blame, that I was a survivor, not a victim. With Amber's continued support and the help of caring adults, I found the strength to speak out. I started sharing my story at community centers and support groups, hoping to help others who suffered in silence. Each time I spoke, a piece of my pain lifted. Years later, I founded an organization called New Beginnings here in Bodie, dedicated to helping children and families escape violence and find hope. What began as small gatherings grew into a lifeline for many. One of the first children to come to us was a young girl named Sophia, scared and silent like I had once been. Watching her find her voice was proof that the cycle of pain could be broken. My story was no longer just about me. It was about hope, resilience, and the power of survival. As the days passed after Michael's arrest, life began to change in ways I never imagined possible. The heavy weight of fear that had pressed on my chest for so long started to lift, though the scars remained, both visible and hidden deep within. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was ready to live. The process wasn't easy. Court dates, interviews, and recounting painful memories tested my strength over and over. But I knew that facing Michael in court was necessary, not only for me, but for every child who might suffer in silence. Each time I spoke my truth, I felt a little braver, a little stronger. Meanwhile, my mother worked hard to rebuild herself, too. She joined support groups for women who had lived with abuse, learning to forgive herself and find peace. Our relationship, once strained by pain and silence, slowly healed as we faced the future together. With Amber's friendship and the support of my family and community, I found purpose beyond my own healing. I threw myself into helping others who had faced similar struggles. New Beginnings, the organization I founded in Bodie, became more than just a support group. It was a sanctuary. We provided a safe space for children and mothers alike, where stories could be shared without judgment, where healing could begin. One of the first children we helped was Sophia, a timid 11-year-old girl who had experienced violence at home, just as I had. When she first joined our meetings, she rarely spoke, hiding behind silence like a shield. But over time, surrounded by understanding and love, she found her voice. One afternoon, during a group session, Sophia raised her hand for the first time and shared her story. Tears flowed freely, not just hers, but from all of us who understood the pain, and hope mingled in her words. It was a powerful moment, proof that the cycle of suffering could be broken. Word about our work spread beyond Bodie. A reporter from the California Daily came to interview us, intrigued by our mission and the change we were creating. At first, I hesitated to share my story with a wider audience. The fear of judgment, the vulnerability, it was overwhelming. But then I remembered Amber's words, "You can be anything." I realized that my story could inspire others to speak up and seek help. The article was published, and responses poured in. parents seeking guidance, teachers wanting to learn how to support traumatized children, survivors reaching out to share their own stories. The impact was greater than I had ever imagined. But the journey was not without challenges. Many still believed that domestic violence was a private matter, something families should handle behind closed doors. Some said children should forget and move on. I knew it wasn't that simple. I saw the trauma in the eyes of every child who came through our doors. I knew the invisible scars they carried. So, I began speaking at schools, community centers, and churches, sharing my story and advocating for awareness. Little by little, people began to listen. I met survivors who told me they felt seen for the first time. I realized that by speaking my truth, I was helping others find theirs. One day, while working at New Beginnings, a woman walked in whose face was familiar. It was the same young girl who had sent me an email years earlier, the girl who said, "You saved me." She had grown into a confident young woman, ready to help others. Her presence was a testament to the power of hope and healing. Reflecting on my journey, I understand now that pain does not define us. It's how we rise above it that shapes who we are. To anyone listening who feels trapped or alone, please know this: you have strength within you. You are not alone, and there is always hope. With Michael gone and the darkest chapter of my life behind me, I face the daunting task of rebuilding not just a home, but a life. The silence that had once been filled with fear transformed into a quiet space for healing. Yet healing wasn't easy, and the road ahead was long. I often found myself awake in the middle of the night, haunted by nightmares and shadows of the past. Sometimes I'd wake in a cold sweat, heart racing, as if Michael was still lurking in the hallway outside my door. But slowly, those nights became less frequent. I learned to breathe through the fear and remind myself that I was safe. School became a place of possibility rather than pain. With Amber's unwavering friendship, I found the courage to speak up, to ask for help, and to stand tall. I started to believe in myself again, little by little. I began to see a future beyond survival, a future where I could thrive. Encouraged by the social worker who helped me, I decided to pursue studies in social psychology. It was not an easy decision. My years of trauma had taken a toll on my academic confidence, but with Amber's help and a renewed sense of purpose, I worked hard to catch up. Every step forward was a victory. 4 years later, I earned my degree and secured an internship at the Chicago Center for Trauma Recovery. Sitting face to face with children who had experienced the kind of pain I knew all too well was both heartbreaking and healing. I saw in their eyes the same fear and uncertainty I once carried, but also the potential for hope. The first child I worked with was a shy 12-year-old girl who barely spoke, weighed down by trauma. I sat beside her quietly, letting her know through my presence that she was not alone. Then, softly, I said, "I know." Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. Working with survivors reaffirmed my belief that pain, while heavy, need not define us. I wanted to do more. I envisioned a place where children and families could come together not just to heal, but to find strength in community. That vision became New Beginnings, a support center in Bodie dedicated to survivors of abuse. Starting small, with just a handful of meetings, our center grew quickly as word spread. More children and mothers sought refuge, understanding, and hope. Each story shared, each hand held, was a step toward breaking the cycle of violence. I witnessed transformations that reminded me why I had endured so much pain. The woman who once feared the darkness now shone as a beacon for others. New Beginnings started as a humble gathering, a small room filled with survivors, their stories heavy, but their spirits yearning for light. What began as a simple support group blossomed into a beacon of hope for Bodhi and beyond. Each week, more people arrived, mothers seeking guidance, children desperate for safety, teachers hoping to better understand trauma, and survivors longing to share their voices. Our little community grew, becoming a family bound by shared pain and healing. The local press caught wind of our work, and soon reporters from the Body Gazette came to tell our story. I was hesitant at first opening wounds, exposing my past to strangers, but I knew that sharing could inspire change. The article painted a picture of resilience, of a community refusing to be broken by violence. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people across California and the country, reaching survivors who felt seen for the first time. But the journey was not without obstacles. Some still clung to the old belief that domestic abuse was a private matter, something to be hidden rather than confronted. Others told victims to forget and move on, as if healing was a simple switch to be flipped. I knew it wasn't that simple. Each face at New Beginnings told a story of invisible scars and ongoing battles. I began speaking at schools, community centers, and churches, sharing my story to raise awareness and advocate for survivors. The more I spoke, the more people listened. Survivors approached me with gratitude, their eyes reflecting relief and hope. One unforgettable day, a woman walked into New Beginnings, a young woman whose eyes held quiet determination and strength. It was the same girl who had sent me an email years before, the one who said, "You saved me." She had come back, ready to help others, just as I had helped her. Her presence was a powerful reminder that healing is a journey we walk together. Reflecting on my life's path, I realized that suffering need not define us. We are not our pain. We are how we rise above it. To anyone listening who feels lost or broken, know this: you have strength within you. You are not alone, and there is always hope. Looking back on my journey from a frightened little girl trapped in silence and fear to a woman who found her voice and purpose, I realized something profound: pain does not define who we are. What truly shapes us is how we rise after falling, how we choose hope in the face of despair. There were moments when I felt broken beyond repair, when the darkness seemed endless and the weight unbearable. But I learned that even in our darkest hours, there is a spark within us that refuses to be extinguished, a strength we often don't know we have until life demands it. My story is not just about surviving abuse or overcoming cruelty. It's about transformation. It's about the power of believing in yourself, the courage to seek help, and the grace to forgive not just others, but ourselves. To anyone listening today who feels trapped by their past, by pain or loneliness, I want you to know this: you are stronger than you think. You are not alone. There is always a way forward, even if you can't see it yet. Sometimes, the path to healing begins with a single step: reaching out, sharing your story, or simply choosing to believe in a better tomorrow. I stand here as living proof that no darkness lasts forever. The light may come slowly, but it comes. And when it does, it can illuminate not just your life, but the lives of those around you. If my story has touched your heart, if it has given you even a glimmer of hope, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. It can inspire others who need to hear they are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories of courage, healing, and transformation, please subscribe to the Grandparents' Memories channel. Together, we can build a community of strength, compassion, and support. Thank you for listening. Keep believing, keep fighting. And remember, you have the power to change your story.